20 years of giving my all to Summit Solutions. Staying late. Swallowing pain just to prove I was worth something. And today they looked me in the eye and discarded me like trash. No explanation. No closure. Just a box. And silence. I walked out that door numb. Humiliated, shattered. I knew they were trying to hide something by dismissing me, but what could that be? But what they didn't see, what they never saw, was the storm building inside me. And now, everything's about to change. My name is Stella Matthews, 50 years old, senior consultant, single mother. And for 20 years, I was the one everyone leaned on at Summit Solutions. Not just another cog in the machine. I was the machine. The one who solved the problems no one else could see. The one who stayed late, put out fires, and carried a team when they couldn't carry themselves. I remember the first time they trusted me to lead. I was 29, fresh from a team-building seminar that no one else bothered to attend. I didn't expect much, just some extra credit. But when the crisis hit, and it always does, I was the one they turned to. I never said no. Not to a client. Not to a colleague. Not even when my own life was falling apart. I gave them everything. My nights. My weekends. The time I should have spent with my son, making memories, not excuses. But that was the choice I made. I was this company. I mentored the team members who struggled to find their feet. I solved the crises they didn't know how to navigate. I even comforted my boss's wife at a company dinner when she couldn't stop crying over things no one dared ask about. I wasn't just another employee. I was their backbone, their silent strength, the one who held it all together when it felt like it was crumbling. When the client was furious and everyone else was panicking, I was the one they'd call. Collected. No drama. Just action. I knew how to make things happen, no matter the cost. And I did. I did it all. But there's no thank you in this world for being the one who always carries the weight. You know why? Because people get used to you. They get used to the calm, the quiet, the fact that you'll always have the answers. They forget that you're human. They forget that you have a limit. And when you finally show them, when you finally say, enough, that's when they turn on you. That's when they cut you loose. And that's exactly what they did. They fired me today. After 20 years. One meeting. Lock screen. A cold escort out the door. And you know what? I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. I've seen this coming for a while. It was a Wednesday. The kind of Wednesday that pretends it's normal. Blue sky, coffee brewing, inbox pinging. I was halfway through writing a report for the MedTech project when the email popped up. Subject: Immediate HR meeting, 11 a.m. Location: Conference Room B. Attendees: Stella Matthews, Richard Crane, Director. Lena Mori, HR. I stared at it. No subject context. No agenda. Just urgency in Times New Roman. Part of me knew. You always know. I stood up slowly, smoothed my skirt with trembling hands, and walked the long hallway past familiar faces that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Conference Room B had always been a war room for big decisions. High-stakes negotiations. Strategy reboots. I had sat on the other side of that table countless times. But this time, the air greeted me like a funeral. Lena gave a tight smile. Richard, my boss of 11 years, couldn't even look at me. Stella, Lena began, her voice rehearsed, as if she'd practiced the words in the mirror. Thank you for coming on such short notice. Richard finally raised his eyes. I'll just come right out with it. This isn't personal. Not personal. That phrase hit like a slap in slow motion. Summit Solutions is going through a restructuring. We've had to make difficult choices, realign our teams with long-term objectives. Your role, your position, is being phased out. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at him. After 20 years, I asked, the words dry in my throat. You restructure me. He shifted in his seat. It's not a reflection of your contributions. You've been foundational. But this is bigger than any one person. Lena chimed in gently. You'll receive severance. We've prepared an exit packet. IT is already securing your systems. We'd like you to collect your things within the next 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Blink. They were erasing 20 years of my life, and giving me less time than a lunch break to disappear. I looked around the room. The silence was sharp. They weren't even pretending to be sorry. I stood up. Composed. But inside was a quiet collapse. I walked back to my office. No, to what used to be my office. Tiffany was gone. Off to a meeting she was now qualified to attend, apparently. I opened drawers and started placing my things into a cardboard box. My mug that said Boss Lady. The framed photo of me and Daniel on his graduation day. The little succulent the team gave me last Christmas. Still alive. Somehow. As I packed, I heard whispers outside my door. They weren't whispering because I was important anymore. They were whispering because they were afraid I might break. But I wouldn't give them that. When I stepped into the hallway, box in hand, people looked away. No goodbye from the ones I trained. No thank you from the ones I saved during quarterly crises. Just silence. Until I reached the elevator, and saw Richard standing there, holding a black umbrella like it might shield him from guilt. He tried to smile. If there's anything we can do. Cut him off. You already did everything, Richard. The elevator dinged. I stepped in. Alone. As the doors slid shut, I caught my reflection in the metal. Tired eyes, tight jaw, box clutched to my chest like a wound. And in that silent descent, I whispered to myself. They think they ended my story. But they don't know the chapter they just started. I didn't go home right away. Couldn't. I sat in my car in the company's parking lot for over an hour, the cardboard box still on the passenger seat. The same box that now felt heavier than my own body. Like grief, it sat there. Quiet, uninvited, unmovable. I kept the engine running just for the hum, like a heartbeat, so I wouldn't feel how still everything else had become. My hands were shaking, but my face stayed frozen. Until it didn't. The tears started slow. Then faster. Then all at once. And I didn't stop them. Because for once, there was no image to protect, no junior staff to inspire, no CEO's wife to comfort, no meeting to lead. I was just a woman. Sobbing in a parked car. Outside a company that no longer had room for her. How do you even begin to explain that to your children? How do you tell your kids that the job that paid for their dreams just threw you away like a forgotten memo? I pulled my phone from my bag and stared at the lock screen. Daniel and Mari's faces smiling back at me. College and high school. Track medals. Graduation gowns. Dreams we'd fought for. I wanted to call them. To tell them everything. But I couldn't find the words. I didn't want them to hear the break in my voice or the shame lodged in my throat. So instead I sat there. And cried for every late night. Every missed recital. Every Sunday spent in strategy meetings. Every birthday that got the, "I'll make it up to you" speech. I remembered the night after their father's funeral. I had returned to work the following Monday, still dressed in black. The company, Summit Solutions, had sent flowers. A white bouquet with a tiny card that read, "Our deepest sympathies. Your Summit family." Family. That word rang in my ears like a cruel joke. Because today there were no flowers. No card. Not even an email. 20 years, and all I got was a meeting and a timer. My mind went back to a moment 12 years ago. Mari was 7. She had the flu, and I had a presentation to lead. I kissed her forehead, tucked her in with ginger tea, and whispered, "Mommy has to build the future. So one day you can build yours." I believed that. And I had built that future. Brick by brick. Sacrifice by sacrifice. And now, I was invisible. not even granted the dignity of a proper goodbye. My hands clenched the steering wheel, the leather groaning beneath my grip. Not because I was angry. Not yet. No, this was something deeper. Something emptier. I had poured myself into something that saw me as disposable the moment I was inconvenient. I was too experienced. Too outspoken. Too old. Too much. The same too much that once made me valuable had now made me vanish. I finally turned off the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. Wiping my face with the sleeve of my blazer, I took a deep breath, looked in the rearview mirror, tried to pull myself together before heading home. Because mothers don't get to fall apart, not in front of their children. I whispered softly, almost to myself. You can grieve later. Right now, just drive. And I did. But as I drove, I felt something else stir underneath the sorrow. Flicker. Beginning. Because even in that silence I knew, this wasn't the end of me. They may have erased my name from the company boardroom, but they couldn't erase my fire. When I got home that night I didn't sleep. The house was still. Daniel was away at college, and Mari had fallen asleep on the couch, her geometry book open on her chest. I kissed her forehead and covered her with a blanket, then walked into the kitchen and sat at the table in the dark. I stared at that box from Summit Solutions. I hadn't opened it since security escorted me out. I reached in slowly. My hands touched pieces of my past, framed photos from company retreats, a plaque from the Outstanding Leadership Award, and that leather-bound notebook I'd used for nearly a decade. My fingers lingered there. I'd always kept notes. Not because I didn't trust people, but because I had learned early. Memory fades, paper doesn't. And in those pages were the whispers of things I had ignored. Late-night meetings that never made it to the calendar. Project names that sounded important but never had a launch. Client visits that no client could confirm. At the time I told myself it was just corporate complexity. Bureaucracy. But now, with distance, I smelled rot. I opened my laptop. The company hadn't yet revoked my email access, and deep down I think they assumed I wouldn't fight back. That I would take my severance, disappear quietly, and leave their polished empire intact. But they forgot who I was. I started digging. Email chains, project files, cross-referencing invoices I had helped submit over the years. One project caught my eye. Blue Haven expansion, Phase 3. Big numbers. Nearly 500,000 in consulting hours billed. But something about it felt off. I didn't remember a Phase 3. I typed the client name into my personal notes. Nothing. No meetings, no deliverables, no team assignments. I pulled up a folder I'd downloaded months ago. Just habit back then. Inside were time logs, billing sheets. I matched the project codes. Phase 3 had been billed by consultants who had already left the company. Some were billing hours after they'd been gone for months. I leaned back, heart pounding. No way this was a mistake. This was a ghost project. And then it clicked. The meetings I wasn't invited to anymore. The way Tiffany, the fresh grad, was being fast-tracked into a corner office. The cold way HR handled my exit. They needed me gone. Quietly. Because I knew too much, even if I hadn't realized it. Till now. I opened another folder. Tuscany Merge Initiative. Another phantom. I scrolled through archived messages from my former boss, Alan. He'd always been smooth, always praised me publicly. But in the private threads, he was signing off on approvals I'd never seen. Routing funds through a web of shell vendors. I blinked, my chest tight. This wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. A slow fury bubbled beneath my ribs. Not just because they used me. Not just because they discarded me. But because they underestimated me. They thought firing me would erase the truth. But I still had the keys to the story. And suddenly, the grief that had buried me earlier began to shift. I wasn't just a mother trying to explain her pain. I was a witness, a keeper of receipts. They thought I would stay silent. They were wrong. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not even my kids. What I had found, it was dangerous. And if I was right, this wasn't just fraud. It was deep, organized, years in the making. So I treaded carefully. First I pulled out my old Rolodex. Buried in one of those battered leather pockets was a number I hadn't used in years. Richard Osei, a former client from the Halperin Group. I'd worked closely with him during our joint rollout in Texas. Sharp mind. Innocence. One of the few executives who treated me like an equal, not just a woman in a suit. I stared at the number and dialed. Hello. His voice was the same, firm, deliberate. Richard. It's Stella Matthews. Silence. Then a warm chuckle. Stella. It's been 8 years? Are you still at Summit? Pause. My mouth tightened. Not anymore. I explained the basics. Kept my voice even. Neutral. I didn't want to sound paranoid. Just curious. Richard, do you remember the Blue Haven expansion project? Phase 3. Another pause. I remember Phase 1 and 2. But wait, Phase 3. That never happened. We stopped at Phase 2. Why? My pulse quickened. Summit billed it. Fully. To your company. 6 months after it ended. A low growl hummed in his throat. Are you sure? I have the invoices. I heard papers rustling. Keyboard clicking. I'll pull our archives. Stella, if what you're saying is true, we were defrauded. That's criminal. Exhaled. I know. And just like that, I wasn't alone anymore. The next day, I didn't go for my usual morning walk. I didn't beg for Mari. I didn't reply to Daniel's texts. Called a lawyer. Her name was Naomi Briggs, a quiet fighter with a reputation for tearing corporate facades apart with silk gloves and iron fists. We met at a small cafe off Washington Avenue. Neutral ground. I sat across from her with my notes, my box, my anger. She listened. Didn't interrupt. Then slowly she leaned forward. You have evidence of racketeering, Stella. This isn't just civil, it's federal. My stomach twisted. They'll come after me. Her eyes narrowed. Then we make the first move. Later that week, Naomi arranged a private meeting with Margaret Tilley, a former Summit board member who had quietly stepped down last year due to health reasons. I remembered her. Cold. Reserved. Always wrapped in pastel cardigans and pearls, like her opinions didn't belong in the boardroom, only the parlor. But when she walked into Naomi's office and saw me sitting there, her composure cracked. Stella, she said. They finally got to you too. Blinked. What do you mean? She sat down slowly, pulling off her gloves. Her hands were trembling. I resigned because I found out Alan had shifted money into phantom contracts. Flagged it. They dismissed me with a generous package and a quiet threat. I've kept quiet. Until now. The room felt electric. You knew. I whispered. She nodded. I was scared. But if you're stepping forward, maybe it's time I do too. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again. But this time, the darkness didn't feel suffocating. Felt still. Watchful. I ran my fingers over the notebook again. The pages weren't just evidence. They were witnesses. Years of names, dates, invoices, signatures. They had underestimated me. I wasn't some frail woman with a tissue in her purse and tears in her throat. I was a record keeper. A truth bearer. And if they thought I was going to go quietly into the night, they picked the wrong woman to mess with. I opened my inbox one last time, just to double-check that nothing else had slipped through the cracks. And that's when I saw it. An email. Sent to Alan. Subject line. Handled. She doesn't suspect a thing. Attached. A screenshot of my own personnel file. With one line in red. Begin early termination process. Leak plausible cause. Decline in performance, emotional distress. They'd planned this, plotted it. I wasn't just let go. I was targeted. And now, I had nothing to lose. Whispers. That's how it always starts. First they ignore you. Then they ridicule you. Then they whisper. It started with a phone call from Paul, one of my former junior consultants. Always jittery. Always loyal. "Stella, what's going on?" Kept my tone flat. "Why?" "People are talking," he said, voice low like the phone was bugged. "Word is, you're fighting back." I let the silence hang in the air. He exhaled. "Good." Blick. No warning. No advice. Just good. The next day, an email slipped into my inbox, from a name I didn't recognize. Lightkeeper42@protonmail.com. Subject. Not everyone's blind. Message. Meet me in the lobby of the old Landmark Hotel. Noon. Come alone. Everything in me screamed trap. But something else whispered louder. Truth comes dressed in risk. The Landmark was quiet, half forgotten, with peeling wallpaper and the smell of old cigars clinging to the curtains. I waited by the fireplace. And then he walked in. Ryan. The IT guy. Barely 30. Quiet. Always had earbuds in. Most people thought he was slow. But I remembered him once fixing a whole system crash in under 5 minutes. He handed me a USB drive. Said nothing. Just this. "I shouldn't be doing this. But what they did to you. To others. Someone has to care." My heart pounded. "What's on it?" "Security footage. Deleted from Summit servers. But I have backups." He looked me dead in the eye. "Check the file dated 3 weeks before they let you go." He turned and disappeared through the side door. Back home, I sat at my kitchen table, the same spot I'd cried into cold coffee just days ago. Plugged in the drive. Clicked through folders. And then there it was. Footage. Date. 3 weeks before my termination. Time. 2:42 p.m. Press play. The screen showed the executive conference room. Alan sat at the head of the table. Beside him, Tiffany. And 2 board members I didn't recognize. Alan leaned in. "Stella's too meticulous. She's already flagged 2 discrepancies. If she digs deeper, this whole operation unravels." Tiffany scoffed. "Then push her out. Emotional strain. Say she's been unstable since her husband died." My breath caught. "Alan. Make it look like a restructure. Quietly. We'll clean up later." He leaned back, sipped his drink and smirked. "She won't fight. She never does." My hands trembled. But it wasn't fear. It was fury. The next morning my phone buzzed again. Another message. No name. "They're watching. Be careful who you trust." I stared out the window. The world outside looked the same. Cars passing, birds flitting between power lines. But everything had changed. I wasn't just fighting for a job anymore. I was fighting for my name, my dignity, my truth. And somewhere inside Summit's ivory tower, they were beginning to feel the tremors. Because word was spreading. Stella's fighting back. She's building a case. Did you hear what she found? Even the ones who'd once ignored me, the interns, the assistants, the janitors, were beginning to watch me differently. With hope. With quiet defiance. Late that night I received another email. This one with a short video clip. Grainy. Clearly a phone recording. It showed Tiffany, outside Summit, handing a manila envelope to someone in a dark suit. She glanced around nervously, then whispered, "She has the files. But she doesn't know about the Cayman account yet." The man took the envelope. "Then we silence her before she does." Sat at. Silence her. My fingers tightened around the mug in my hand. This was bigger than I imagined. Darker. But I'd already stepped into the storm. And now, there was no going back. Karma doesn't knock. She creeps in. Quiet shoes. Cold hands. And she remembers everything. It started with whispers in the hallway. The same hallways where I used to walk with purpose, clipboard in hand, schedules memorized, deals dangling from phone calls and trust. No. It was Tiffany who walked those corridors. But her walk wobbled. I heard it first from Felicia, one of the junior partners I'd mentored. Stella, she can't even explain the Carver project budget to the board. She's drowning. I didn't smile. Not on the outside. But deep inside, a part of me whispered, "You built a throne of lies, Tiffany. Now sit in it." The cracks widened fast. Clients began canceling without fanfare. One by one. Carver Tech was the first. Then Westcott Holdings. Then my long-standing client, Havenbridge International. They didn't shout. They simply stopped replying. Then, out of nowhere, an envelope slid under my door. No return address. Inside, a copy of an internal memo. Due to recent client exits, Tiffany's position will be temporarily reassessed. Reassessed. I knew what that meant. The castle was crumbling. But I wasn't done yet. I sat in my living room, surrounded by boxes I hadn't touched in years. Not the boxes from my layoff, but older ones. Labeled with years. 2017, 2018, 2019. Files. Contracts. Emails I had printed and archived, just in case. Back then it was just habit. Now it was ammunition. Each folder unearthed something. Overbilled hours. Projects that were ghostwritten by interns but billed as senior work. Duplicate vendor payments that were retracted quietly, but never reported. And photos. Photos of Alan and 2 board members at private retreats. Retreats billed as company strategy summits. I even found an old invoice sent to Summit Finance for a private jet. Routed to Las Vegas. The approval signature. Tiffany's. I created a spreadsheet, date by date, document by document. My lawyer, Sheila, looked at it all in stunned silence. "This is damning," she whispered. "You're not just looking at a wrongful termination case anymore. You're sitting on corporate fraud, tax evasion, and potential RICO implications." I nodded slowly. They silenced others. They underestimated me. She leaned in. "Do you want to go public?" Pause. "No, not yet." There was something more satisfying than revenge. Taming. Let them stew. Let them wonder. Let the world unravel at its own pace. That week, a journalist contacted me. He'd heard rumors. Anonymous tips. Talk of forged documents and client fallout. "I've been looking into Summit for months," he said. But no one would speak. Then suddenly, "People are starting to talk." Gave him nothing. But I could feel the tide shifting. Even Tiffany knew it. I saw her once, in the parking lot of the firm. Her mascara streaked. Her hands shaking as she tried to start her car. She didn't see me in the distance, watching. She had the title. Corner office. Power. But none of the wisdom. And now, none of the control. Karma had begun her dance. Low. Boys. I wasn't guiding it anymore. I was simply watching it unfold. And every file I added to that growing folder on my desktop, labeled Truth, felt like another breath of justice. They thought they erased me. But all they did was set the stage. For something far greater than they ever imagined. Came in a white envelope. Thick cardstock. Gilded lettering. Embossed seal of Summit Consulting. "You are cordially invited to the 25th anniversary gala." Cordially. The word tasted like rusted metal in my mouth. I was invited as an afterthought. A ghost in a dress. A relic they could parade to show they still had a heart. No mention of my 20 years. No note of gratitude. Just a generic invite, signed by Alan's assistant. Not even Alan himself. Courtesy. They thought I'd come and smile, sip wine, and applaud speeches about legacy and leadership. Leadership I had carried on my back while others took the credit. They had no idea. I pulled the dress from the back of my closet. Midnight black. Tailored. Elegant. The kind that didn't whisper revenge. It declared it. The folder labeled Truth was heavier now. USB drives. Screenshots. Legal letters. A few statements from ex-employees who finally found the courage to speak. And one last document, freshly notarized, tucked inside a slim black envelope, sealed and addressed to the board. I slid it into my clutch bag. As I stood before the mirror, earrings clipped in place, I whispered to my reflection. They think I'm coming to smile. Oh, I'll come. I locked eyes with myself. But I won't be smiling. The night they chose to celebrate their legacy would be the night they watched it crack. Not with fireworks, but with truth. The ballroom shimmered under soft golden chandeliers. Laughter spilled into the air like perfume, rich and curated. Everyone looked polished, jewels catching the light, champagne bubbling in tall flutes. I walked in quietly, in heels that clicked with intention, wearing a dress that hugged my silence like armor. Heads turned. Some smiled too eagerly. Alan, Tiffany, the board. Others averted their gaze. Guilt isn't easy to disguise under mascara and tuxedos. They didn't know what I carried in my clutch. Not perfume. Not lipstick. Truth. Alan took the mic first. Tonight we celebrate 25 years of excellence, of innovation, of family. Family. The word nearly made me choke. And one of our longest-serving team members, the heart of Summit Consulting for 2 decades, is with us tonight. Please, a round of applause for Stella Matthews. Polite claps. Some sincere. Most performative. I smiled gently. Walked to the stage slow and steady. Took the mic. The room quieted. I scanned their faces. The interns I mentored. The managers I trained. The partners who signed my dismissal. And Tiffany, already drowning in a job too big for her hands. I inhaled. I gave 20 years of my life to this company. I began, voice firm but calm, and I left quietly. But not empty-handed. Every fork lowered. Every glass froze mid-air. I left with memories, files, records, emails, signed contracts that somehow didn't match submitted invoices, and footage, like a 6-minute clip of documents being shredded late at night. I let it breathe. My silence was mistaken for weakness, my age for irrelevance, my loyalty for convenience. Alan rose from his seat, face flushing. I turned to him. Sit down, Alan. This is still my minute. Scattered applause broke out, then grew. I wasn't shouting. I didn't need to. I looked at the crowd one last time. This company taught me many things. But most of all it taught me this. Truth has a long memory. And it always arrives. Sometimes dressed in black. I stepped off the stage. Not smiling. Just beginning. As I descended the stage, heels touching the steps like a gavel, I gave a subtle nod to the tech assistant in the back. That was all it took. The chandeliers dimmed. And the screens came alive. It started with a spreadsheet, harmless at first glance, until the numbers began to shift, highlighted line by line. Payments to vendors who didn't exist. Duplicate invoices with identical amounts submitted under different names. Silence blanketed the room. Then came the emails. Adjust the report. No one checks quarterlies that deep. Push this through under Stella's code. She won't notice. She's on her way out anyway. I watched their faces. One woman clutched her pearls. A man gripped his wine like a lifeline. Then the footage. A dim hallway. A door creaking open at 1:42 a.m. Tiffany. Yes, bright-eyed Tiffany. Wearing latex gloves, feeding stacks of paper into an industrial shredder. Alone. Nervous. But there. Complicit. The footage flickered into stillness. You could hear a pin drop beneath the weight of betrayal. Alan stood frozen, face drained. His wife, perched beside him in glittering jewels, turned her head with surgical precision. The sound cracked through the room louder than any speaker system could have managed. His cheek turned red. His pride pulverized. Gasps erupted. Tiffany rose, trembling, mascara running like truth down her cheek. "You set me up," she cried to Alan, voice shaking. "You told me it was normal. You said Stella wouldn't fight back." She stormed out, heels crashing against marble like broken promises. "I didn't move. I didn't need to." Security, almost on cue, approached Alan. They whispered. He shook his head. They didn't care. They flanked him on either side, gently but firmly guiding him toward the exit as cameras flashed like Judgment Day. Alan didn't look at me, but I watched him. Not with triumph. With finality. Because I knew now, I didn't need vengeance. I had justice. The room stirred as I turned to leave, but one in turn, sweet Jordan, who once brought me coffee during late nights, stood and clapped. Then another. And another. Applause swelled. Not thunderous, not wild. Just steady. Respectful. Like a bow to a warrior no one saw coming. Nay. I walked out without a word. Not as a victim. But as the woman who burned the whole illusion to the ground. Not with rage. But with truth. The world didn't stop spinning the next morning. The sky didn't break open in applause. No headlines, no parades. But in the quiet hum of a modest home office, something new began. My nameplate didn't say, Senior Consultant. It read, Stella Matthews. Independent Strategy and Ethics Advisor. Funny how freedom doesn't come with fireworks. Comes with silence. With the sigh of a chair that fits your back just right. With coffee that tastes like choices. With mornings that don't feel like dread. Clients began to reach out. Not out of pity but out of respect. "We always admired how you handled things," they said. "You kept your integrity. That matters now more than ever." And it did. I started small, just a few contracts, a handful of trusted names. But the phone kept ringing. I wasn't building a business. I was building a sanctuary for those who valued truth over politics, results over power plays, character over convenience. I didn't return Alan's calls. Yes, he tried. A weak apology typed through a PR assistant, no doubt. I left it unread. Because I wasn't interested in going back to anything that had to break me before it saw me. I looked around my new space. Books I actually loved, photos of my children on the desk, and a small painting of a lighthouse above the window. My daughter gave it to me after everything happened. "You were that light, Mom," she said. "Even when they tried to drown you." And now here I am. Still standing. Still shining. No title, no corner office. But more powerful than ever. Because I didn't get revenge. Got freedom. And it tastes like fresh coffee in your own mug. Like peace that no one can confiscate. Like a door you opened yourself with your own name on the wall. To you listening right now, what would you do if they blindsided you? What if you poured your heart into something for years, only to be discarded like expired ink? Would you break? Or would you rise? Because here's what I know now. They can underestimate you. They can ignore you. They can even try to erase you. But they can't undo the strength you build when you decide to rise anyway. So to every woman, every man, every soul who has ever been overlooked, dismissed, or pushed out, you're not done. You're not finished. You're not too old, too kind, too quiet, or too late. You're just one decision away from your own beginning. Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated and proved them wrong. This is your story too. Write it well. Please do well to subscribe for more intense drama.